Have you ever been chastised for a decision you've made? How about chided for a choice that ended in detriment? Do you think it would make you feel better if there was scientific reasoning behind the choices you made and the fact that these convoluted decisions were not particularly made at will? This is just the type of scenario drug addicts face on a daily basis. While having a reason for bad choices we make in life may not necessarily make us feel better, it is a relief to put a proverbial face with the name. Tonight, the face for the name that we are going to examine is addiction, the disease. I'd like to open this disquisition with a quote from Dr. Michael Miller, the former president of the ASAM, which is the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And the ASAM is the United States' largest professional society of doctors dedicated to preventing and treating addiction. And Dr. Miller says, and I quote, "At its core, addiction isn't just a social problem or a moral problem or a criminal problem. It's a brain problem whose behaviors manifest into all the other areas. Many behaviors driven by addiction are real problems and sometimes criminal acts. But the disease is about brains, not drugs. It's about underlying neurology, not outward actions." Before we proceed, let me define the term disease, as told by Merriam-Webster, the most well-known and trusted definition specialist of our time. A disease is a condition of the living animal or plant body, or one of its parts, that impairs normal functioning and is typically manifested by distinguishing signs and symptoms. There is a secondary definition also: a harmful development. And if I've ever known addiction, a harmful development is an excellent definition for it. So, as a breakdown of the definition in reference to addiction, the part of the living animal, or us as humans, that has impaired normal functioning, which is the erratic changes that occur during active addiction, is in our brain, thusly making addiction a brain disease. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is the NIDA, there was a site that was advancing addiction science. That is where all these facts are going to be presented from today. And let's divulge just a little deeper into that blanket statement that I made a minute ago. First and foremost, our human brain is the most complex and mysterious organ in our makeup. This 3-pound mass of gray and white matter is the epicenter of human activity. Our brain is necessary for everything from the most complex assignment to involuntary activities that we're not even fully aware of that sustain our human life. Simply stated, your brain is you. Everything you do, think, or feel, your brain is essentially who you are. And when that changes, and when there's changes to who you are, the person that you were, you are no more. And that is exactly what happens in addiction. So to see why these changes happen the way that they do, we must examine the 3 areas of the brain most affected by drug use and the detriment or negative changes it causes in the brain. This is why addiction is considered a disease of the brain. The basal ganglia, it plays an important role in positive forms of motivation. This includes the pleasurable effects of healthy activities like eating, socializing, even sex. And they're also involved in the formation of habits and routines. These areas form a key node of which is sometimes called the brain's reward circuit. Drugs overactivate this circuit. This actually produces the euphoria of the drug high. When this circuit is overworked, you get a flood of euphoria, which causes you more or less to seek that euphoria again. Then there's the extended amygdala, which plays a role in stressful feelings like anxiety, irritability, and unease. The combination of these feelings characterize withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal is typically the main motivator for an individual to seek drugs again. This circuit also becomes increasingly sensitive with continued drug use. Now, it's said by a lot of, people that have that continuously use drugs, that they stop getting high, they just start to get by. And what is explained by the increasing sensitivity in the extended amygdala explains exactly that. Using drugs to get temporary relief from these symptoms, not to even get high anymore. And lastly, the prefrontal cortex. And this area of the brain powers the ability to think, plan, solve problems, make decisions, and exert self-control over impulses. This is also the last part of the brain to mature, making teens or young abusers the most vulnerable to addiction. And just to quickly let you see where these areas are in the brain, you have it outlined here in the aqua blue, the basal ganglia, which sits toward the top of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, here marked in a darker blue, which sits over toward the front of the brain, and the extended amygdala sitting here in purple, which basically lies in and splits them in between, lying toward the bottom of the brain. And this shifting balance between the prefrontal cortex circuit, the reward and stress circuits of the basal ganglia and extended amygdala, it makes up the distinguishing characteristics of a typical drug addict. Uncontrolled compulsory drug use with lowered inhibitions and poor decision-making skills. So essentially, the primary use of drugs is most certainly an at-will choice. The disease of addiction, though, is explained in this speech. The physiological changes in the brain that promote the atypical behavior of an addict are beyond willful control. I want to leave you with a quote from yet another doctor and former president of the Canadian Society of Addiction Medicine, and he's also a chair of the ASAM Committee on the New Definition of Addiction. The disease creates distortion in thinking, feelings, and perceptions, which drive people to behave in ways that are not understandable to others around them. Simply put, addiction is not a choice. Addictive behaviors are a manifestation of the disease, not a cause. We have to stop moralizing, blaming, controlling, or smirking at the person with the disease of addiction. Thank you.